Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the Lost V3 Round It. A lot going on in the Rocket family at Lost. Last year, one of Lost's most popular boards in the entire lineup was the V3 Rocket, and that board had a lot of success on the water, anywhere from professional surfers winning up to $50,000 in contests riding stock V3 Rockets, all the way to the most recreational of recreational surfers using it as a great, better wave board complement to their domesticated, like wider, shorter board. And everything in between. The V3, very, very popular board. And it continues in the line and is already a popular board this year in 2015. Lost is building out the Rocket family, in a very similar way that they did to the original Rocket. When they had the OG Rocket, they had the Rocket, and then they built out that lineup. Also, they had the Rocket, they had the Squash It, which was a squash tail version of the Rocket, and then they also had the Grocket, which was a swallowtail version. And not only were the tails different, but there was also subtle differences in the rocker, in the nose shape, in the foil of the board, basically everything. All Rockets, all trying to do those same things, but just subtle differences. That's what Lost is doing now with the build out of the Rocket line. The V3 Rocket will continue, and it again is just as popular as it ever has been, with the double wing into the Rocket tail. Right now what we're holding is the V3 Round It, and then there's also a V3 Squash It, which we'll talk about later in a different review. The V3 Round It, compared to the standard V3 Rocket, has a slightly narrower nose. So if you're holding the boards side by side, what you're going to notice is that the V3 Rocket nose has more of a curve straight off of the point, comes out here and then back in on both sides. And it's also a little bit thicker up through this section of the board. And then also in the back of the board with the Rocket tail, the very end of the board back here has more area in it. It's not pulled into that round tail. So how does this board differ compared to the V3 Rocket? Having a little bit less nose area, you're going to have less swing weight in the turns, so you're going to feel the board pivoting, and you'll be able to throw the board around with less weight way out in front of you. I have one of these boards as well in a 6-1, and right off the bat, notice the turns off of the top of the wave are quicker. If you're in really hollow waves and doing late drops, it's got less nose to hang up into the face of the wave and cause you to get pitched over the nose on a late drop. And then also having a little bit less tail area, the board works a little bit better in punchier surf, not having everything so far out the back of the board as far as tail block. The board, there are some misconceptions of the board, because if you put a round tail, or even, some people might even call this a round pin, but it really doesn't have a point on it anywhere, it's just round. But when you put a round tail like this on a board, people immediately think, oh, it's a step-up board. And we've had a lot of people come to us and say, oh, I have a V3 Rocket, it's my favorite board ever, and so I'm going to get the V3 Rounded as my step-up board. And that definitely would be, I think, a mistake, because if you got this board a couple inches bigger than your V3 Rocket, it would then, if you're buying stock sizes, it would then be way too voluminous, and like the rails would be too thick. It would just feel boaty compared to your V3 Rocket. And on top of that, the design itself really isn't meant to be used in towering surf, especially right side by side with a V3 Rocket. What this board is compared to a V3 Rocket, if you have a V3 Rocket, or if you're thinking about getting a V3 Rocket, that's like your everyday board for middle of the range conditions. This would be a great board in that exact same scenario if you lived in a place that had punchier surf. So if you had, if all of the waves were a little bit holler, if all the waves had a little bit more thickness, and if all of the waves just had more speed through the water, this is going to be a better choice compared to the standard V3. The other thing is just, some people like the Rocket tail, some people hate the Rocket tail. Some people like round tails, some people hate round tails, some people like squash tails. A lot of people like squash tails, and that's one of the reasons they put the Squash It in the lineup again. So with the round tail, a lot of people like round tails, and they're surfing, they like that smooth transition in and out of turns. They don't want the pivot of a more squared off tail, whether it be a rocket tail or a squash tail. They want to have a smoother transition in and out of those turns, and the rounder tail tends to have that type of turn. The V3 Rounded continues to have these wings, so wing here, and then into the round tail. A lot of these boards you're going to see set up as a 5-fin setup, if not all of them. I've been riding this board with anything from FCS2 Carvers set up as a tri-fin. I've ridden it with the Carvers as a quad setup, and I've ridden it with the Mayhem 5s both ways, and it works really well both quad and tri. The board, again, like, it's just a great all-around board. I definitely noticed the nose being narrower, like without even reading the literature or reading the website, just paddling out, I looked and I'm used to seeing the rocket nose come off at an angle, and this, you definitely notice it right away. Still has really good paddle for such a narrow nose, and that's something that you wouldn't expect, but the nose is narrower than the standard V3. So it's the V3 Rounded from Lost, great mid-range board, especially if there's a little bit more push in the water and you're a big fan of the round tails. Check out more information, more insider info, the tech, and all the reviews at realwatersports.com/surfing, and search for the Lost V3 Rounded page. Thanks for tuning in.